Hey there! Are you looking for a way to learn more about succession planning while also having fun and networking with your legal management peers? Then look no further than ALA's annual conference, happening May 19th to 22nd, 2024 in Aurora, Colorado. Registration is still open, and you don't want to miss out on all the educational sessions, opportunities to talk with business partners, and events like the Wild West Welcome Reception and Casino Night on the closing day. It's sure to be a great time. For more information, go to alaannualconf.org. We can't wait to see you there. Hello, and welcome to Legal Management Talk, the official podcast of the Association of Legal Administrators. I'm your host, Justin Eskenazi. So today our guest is David Wood. He is a former trial attorney, and he is now the principal of David Wood Consulting, which helps law firms with their retirement and succession plans. Thanks so much for being here, David. It's great to have you.
Good morning. Nice to be here.
So we're going to talk today about succession planning, and those who have been following legal management and legal management talk know well that we've been kind of beating the drum on this for a while, and that's because it is so important for firms to really have a grasp on. But I'm curious from a perspective of somebody who's been there, done that, who's been a lawyer and has seen, the things that go right and the things that go wrong. From your perspective, why is it so important to think about succession planning now, no matter what point in their career a lawyer is?
Succession is an issue that affects all law firms, from the smallest to the very largest, although there's a lot less margin for error the smaller you are. What a law firm needs to think about is there really is an existential threat to every single law firm's future, because because we sell our time for a living. I'm having a hard time using the past tense, by the way, because I retired from being a trial lawyer as of January 1st. But I've been working with firms. A surprising number of firms have come to me since then to talk about succession, and mostly my experience and how I can duplicate that for them. But every single law firm sells time for a living. That's their stock and trade. So if you don't have the next generation that is just as capable, just as good at marketing, just as good at rainmaking to replace that revenue on your outgoing, retiring generation of partners, the firm's dead. There simply is no way to survive. Now, there's a lot of gradations in between having nobody and having a full complement of the next generation, and most firms are in between. But if I were talking to a lawyer in the beginning or the middle of his or her career, what I would say is if you ever think about moving laterally, make sure you ask about succession. And as you move up on the ladder within your firm, if you decide that's where you want to make your career, make sure that you're watching and asking questions about how that new generation is being pushed up that vertical pipeline that is every law firm. Because what you want to listen for is that there aren't obstacles between you and the top of that pipeline.
Right. So you came up with a pretty robust plan for how to exit a firm, to retire. And when I first learned about it, the phrase popped in my head is the world's most effective disappearing act. Everyone will see why here in a second. And the visual that also popped in my head, for those who are familiar with memes, is the one of Homer Simpson receding back into the hedges. So kind of both of those are reflective of the plan that you came up with. And so I was wondering if you could kind of take us through how that works.
The key to every succession plan is to move that very capable generation into place so that they can take their time, make their stand at the tops of their firm. And when I retired from an 800 lawyer firm, Barnes and Thornburg, Indianapolis-based firm, AmLaw 73, just the 2023 results just came out. So, it's a sizable firm, not huge, but not small. And what I found was my practice my practice is almost exclusively large corporate clients, and succession was very much on my mind for a number of reasons. One is to make sure that my clients got service continuity when I was gone, but two, to make sure that the younger lawyers, the senior associates, the junior partners, who had really gotten me where I am today. I mean, without their hard work, without their excellent work, I could never have gone out and done the marketing and business development that it took to grow a big practice. So what I always told them was, you work hard for me, I will make sure that you inherit my clients. So that, and I was proud that they did. They did an awesome job for me. They're doing an awesome job for, I can't call them my clients anymore because they're really theirs. And therein lies the invisible man analogy, because I did my transition. Really, I started a number of years before I retired, because my subject area was insurance recovery. It's very technical. It takes a lot of time to learn the practice area. And I needed to make sure that the people coming up in the generation behind me were subject matter experts. After that, they had to learn, I think, an even harder skill, which is how to communicate with a client so that what you're not saying is, well, it's so complicated, I'm going to have to, take 5 pages and 2 hours to explain it to you, to get it down into a much, much smaller Reader's Digest version. That's a skill that is harder, I think, than learning the subject matter. So in the final 2 years of my practice, I devoted my time almost exclusively to teaching that communication skill in the following way. One was to push them into leadership positions with me so that we were co-approaching the client. So we were showing up at the same meetings, the same hearings, the same places where clients had visibility to us, so that I could give my subordinate lawyers their time in the sun, and the clients could notice them, notice their competence, but not yet independently from me. The second stage was to push them farther into the limelight and me step back. I was still there. The clients could still see me. I was still obviously the sponsor of these very capable younger lawyers, but they were the ones that, I pointed the clients to, and sometimes it was literally as much a physical process of when, clients reflexively directed a question to me, I would look at my subordinate, and the clients got used to, I did it in a way that didn't make them feel like I wasn't answering their question, but the idea was to bring my younger lawyers into that decision-making process that the client was going through, so that the client could start to get used to them. Now, the last phase was for me to step out of client visibility entirely. And that takes a lot of discipline from the senior partner, because, of course, we built up this practice. We went out and got these clients. I had relationships with my clients dating back many, many years, some of them. And, many of them were friends. So stepping out and leaving my younger partners in sort of the impact zone, where they now, in the eyes of the clients, led these teams, was scary for the clients, because they were having to make a leap of faith that my confidence in my successors was justified. And it was a leap of faith for my junior lawyers, because they had to be willing to make mistakes and to learn from them. And it took a tremendous amount of faith from me in them to say, look, we learn from trial and error. Obviously, if there's a horrible mistake, then I would intervene. But these were very, very competent lawyers, are very, very competent lawyers. But I could always do everything better, because, I had been practicing for 38 years and they had been practicing for less time than that. So I had to let them make their, incremental mistakes, which I regarded as, largely immaterial. But because they were perfectionists, I was a perfectionist. I taught them to be perfectionists. Any slight imperfection is something that we sweated, because that's how we got to the quality of service that we delivered. So I had to step out ultimately and let the client see them. But what I also did was to coach them from behind the scenes. And that probably was the most time-consuming part of the client transition process, because that's where I really got down into the nuances. So instead of spending, I would rehearse a presentation that one of my team members had to make with him or her. And the idea was to help them hone that down, to take as little of the client's time as possible. I had to become, though, the invisible man, because otherwise I would be distracting the client from looking at my junior partner as the team leader.
Yeah, and you mentioned discipline, and that strikes me as really one of the key points, because it's, as someone who's been doing something for nearly 40 years, and that's been your life, it has to be so hard to remove yourself from your cases, and really try to step back and stop yourself from keeping your fingers in a bunch of different pots, while you're trying to hand everything off.
And I didn't do it in a vacuum, Justin. It was, I really had a team behind me that was supporting me, that was extremely important to the outcome that, my team and I achieved, which was the entire transfer of my $6 million book of business to a team of successors. Chief marketing officer, huge, because partner retirements are really create a platform that's an awesome marketing opportunity. It's a great time to check in with the client about the nuts and bolts of the relationship and look for ways to improve it and ways to expand it, because clients really care about partner retirements. Intuitively, a lot of partners simply walk away from their clients one day. I don't know. I can't imagine why a partner would do that, and yet it happens all the time, and clients are irritated by that. They don't like the fact that, they call one day and find out that the guy is gone, because that creates a huge problem for them. Now, what do? Do they go back to the retiring partner's firm and ask who is teed up to step in? They definitely don't like the assumption that underlies that approach, that, they're going to bond with a successor just because they have a couple of lunches with them. Or do they go out and find new counsel at another firm, which is a very time-consuming process for an in-house lawyer and in a law department of a big corporation. And I could go on and on about why that is, but take my word for it. It's really a pain in the neck for them. So clients really don't like this. What I did was to bring marketing people into these meetings where I brought successors and a succession plan to each client, and made that a time where, because I was getting general counsel or deputy general counsel's undivided attention, because they are, they care about this subject so much, my team and I used that opportunity to strengthen the relationship. And that's really key. Our chief legal operations officer, also huge, backer of this process. So I want to give a shout out to the administrators that sit behind client service teams like mine, because that's really what adds the meat to the bones. I mean, we can go in and talk about legal services, but clients really want way more than that. They want efficiency. That's what legal operations gives them. They want the opportunity to see what else the firm does, because if they like what we do, and they want to see whether we have other resources. I am far less conversant about that than our chief marketing officer was. So that's, the team is way bigger than anybody thinks.
Right. And that's a perfect segue to what I was going to ask you about, which is the role of the administrator in creating and helping move forward with this plan. Because, like I said, you can't do it in a vacuum, and so everybody has to kind of pitch in and be knowledgeable about the process that the retiring attorney is trying to go through. So what are some of the ways that administrators can best help their retiring lawyers, think about and follow through on a effective succession plan?
Succession is a way bigger topic than client transitions, because client transitions really are the end of a succession plan. If a firm puts into effect a firm-wide succession plan, the end part of that process is what we've been talking about so far, which is going to the clients with a proactive plan for, here are your successors, here's how we're training them, here's how we're going to migrate them into leadership positions with you, the client, and here's how I'm going to choreograph that process and be with you every step of the way. But that, although that is, the outward facing piece for clients, behind the scenes, that is the last piece in a much larger puzzle. And that puzzle is, how does the firm replace my generation in a broad sense? And as we started this time together talking about, if we don't do that, that's an existential threat to the firm, or at the very least, something that threatens, a profit margin that is how we earn our living. So administrators are the people where management starts with in the process of planning, how is the firm going to replace my generation? And typically it's the managing partner or the management committee of a firm that is creating and putting in front of the partnership a strategic plan for growth. And growth obviously can't happen unless there is a very capable generation behind mine that will make the firm flourish so that it can then grow. And the administrators are the ones that this project is handed off to. So it's the administrators that have to figure out, okay, consistent with the firm's culture, how much do we want to regulate partner retirements? Obviously, the ultimate regulation of partner retirements is to incentivize retiring partners, to support retiring partners, and if necessary, to herd the cats among retiring partners to make sure that they do those client migrations at the end of the day. But there's a lot more to it because, some partners, wander the halls of a firm long after they've become productive. Firms have to make a decision whether that's good for the firm and good for those partners. Some partners take the position that because, I originated a client 20 years ago, I should be able to, collect a share of that client's collections, into the future without end, even though I'm not working hard anymore. And a firm has to decide whether to regulate that, whether to have a sunset provision on origination credit. A firm has to decide whether to require retirement at some point for partners or to just simply let partners make their own decisions about when to step away and how to step away. Some partners, like me, turned out the lights one day and went home. Other partners, they retire in place, and it's more of a gradual, incremental process. It's the administrators that have to take the direction of management to go out and figure out what decisions we have to make as a firm in order to regulate retirement in a way consistent with our culture that gets us to those client transitions. And it's the administrators that have to create the program that sits behind it and have to administer that program as it starts in its conceptual phase, goes to the partnership for a vote or to the management committee, depending on how decisions are made at a particular firm, and ultimately comes down to the retiring partner level for actual execution.
Yeah. Let me ask you, since you mentioned it, about the mandatory retirement age concept. Is that something that you're seeing is relatively popular in firms? And if so, how effective is it? Is it something that is a challenge when recruiting newer attorneys?
Mandatory retirement, whether to have it, how to do it, is a real third rail issue. There are very capable experts, consultants out there in the legal industry who just say it's a bad idea across the board. There are a lot of firms that have a hard and fast date by which a partner must retire, sort of on the other end of the spectrum. But there's a lot, and there are firms that also think it's just a bad idea. So there are a lot of voices in the industry that have opinions about this. I've never seen any research that shows distribution of mandatory retirement provisions in partnerships within the industry. And I'm not sure that it would be all that useful to know that, because I have never seen a firm, although I know that they're out there, I've never talked with a firm that had a drop-dead mandatory retirement. You get to age 67, it's how old I am. And, the day of your birthday, we give you a birthday cake and we take your keys. I don't know of anybody who does that. More often, if a partnership wants to have a mandatory retirement age, and by the way, I think there's a lot to be said for putting guardrails around when a partner retires, only because if what a firm cares about is making sure that we continue to be productive at all times, that we are serving a firm, that we are partners with a firm. If that's the idea, and it is, I don't think it's in anybody's best interest to have non-productive partners, sort of sapping cash flow. There are certainly plenty of failures of big law firms to, that can be traced to that in whole or in part. But mandatory retirement is rarely that draconian. It's a way that a firm can make it, I don't want to say more challenging. It's really how a partner is, as the partner gets older, has to justify the, continued presence within the firm. And that's where I see mandatory retirement working best, which is to say, okay, you gotta retire at age 67 unless. And then what comes after the unless really is how the firm regulates a partnership. Some firms don't want to regulate it at all. They're never going to have a mandatory retirement process. Some firms want to put the burden of establishing their continued productivity on the partner. They're the ones that'll say, you got to retire at 67 unless you can show us that you continue your continued presence here is good for the firm, and then we'll give you annual renewals or every 3 years renewals. Some firms say you can only get 1 or 2 renewals, and then we'd like you to move on to your new life. And literally, there are dozens of configurations of these regulations surrounding a mandatory retirement age that really reflect that it's the word mandatory really is much squishier than that it suggests. So I would welcome research on this, but I have a feeling what a researcher would tell us is that there's so many iterations of mandatory that it's not really that useful to talk about this in terms of, must a partner walk away at a particular age? I think it's more precise to talk about under what terms must a partner walk away or gradually recede or, continue to serve in a different way. I think those are the real questions. And those are questions that administrators have to wrestle with, because often they're given the project by the managing partner that says, suggest to us for consideration regulations that reflect how we do things. And if a firm has a culture of, closeness and collegiality, partners have strong relationships with each other, they don't want to offend each other, that tends to break against a mandatory anything, because, partners are close and they don't want to tell each other what to do. And, there's nothing wrong with being that way. But it does mean that every partner retirement is a negotiation from the ground up. Whereas if there are some guardrails around the timing and terms of retirement, there's a place where negotiation over when retirement has to happen, the terms for that retirement, there's a place where those negotiations start that makes them a little more efficient.
Yeah. No, I find it fascinating because I'm sure that's the discussion around guardrails is something that's going to be had by a lot of firms and coming up soon. And that's largely because of this last thing that I want to talk about. And that's a term that you've mentioned before called the Great Retirement. So we had the Great Resignation a couple of years ago, and now we're in the Great Retirement. So can you kind of describe what that is and, what firms can do to kind of limit the potential negative effects that has?
The Great Retirement, I hear that term being used sort of out there in corporate America, because it used to be that certainly when my parents' generation, corporate America moved people out at age 65, whether they were ready to or not. It was just, and they expected that. They saw it coming. there were pensions, that were linked to that age, that retirement age. The age 65 was in the public lexicon of that being the day that everybody retires. It's simply not that case anymore. There are, companies don't have pensions anymore. They have self-funded things like 401k plans, but the 65 retirement age assumption is just gone. I think during COVID, my generation, now I'm talking about out there in corporate America, among our clients, really. During COVID, my age started to think about retirement more because we were at home, and that was a really new concept. I had spent, my career flying around the country, parachuting into courtrooms, suing insurance companies on behalf of large corporate clients. And, being at home, I found that, I was delighted by hearing my wife sing as she goes about her daily life. Who knew that that's what she did? And I realized, I love being at home. I hadn't been at home for a long, long time. And I think there are a lot of people out there who found that being at home actually kind of was nice. Now, I'm sure there were plenty of people who thought, oh my goodness, this is the last place I want to be. But I think people thought about retirement. And when COVID, receded, that became something that they pursued. Now, in the legal industry, I kind of see a different dynamic going on. Partners are really resistant to retirement for a number of reasons. It's a difficult topic to talk with somebody about, because even discussing it, to have that word come out of the mouth of somebody my age who's still practicing is dangerous, and it feels really uncomfortable, because just by talking about it, you're admitting that, it's something that is sitting behind everything that I do. And I would project, when I was a practicing lawyer, that I'm at the top of my game, I'm at the peak of my career, and I can give you the best service I've ever been able to give. And you have the best me that you're ever going to get. But the flip side of that is, and the minute I start to slide, I'm past my prime. I'm over the hill. So talking about retirement is sort of an admission that all I can do is go down from here. That was kind of scary. Partners are also, they have a fear of financial insecurity. And they know that if they transition their practices to other lawyers, those practices are never coming back. If they lose all their assets in a Ponzi scheme, they can't go back to their firms and expect to get their clients back from their junior partners. It's just not going to happen. So I think that the great retirement hasn't hit law firms the way it's hit corporate America. But it would not be incorrect to talk about my generation's exit from practice as a great retirement solely by the demographics, because we're such a big, baby boom generation is such a big bulge in the middle of the snake. What I think is probably maybe a little bit more descriptive a term is to call it the great slow retirement, because I think that bulge in the middle of the snake that my generation represents is moving more slowly through, that process than perhaps it would otherwise, but for those fears that I've just described. Now, what that means is the good side, the good thing about that is that administrators, firm managers have more time to get their arms around what to do with my generation, and in particular, how to prepare for my generation's walking away. The fact that we're not leaving the instant we turn age 65 anymore, and in most instances not pushed out the door at that age or somewhere near it, it means that we have a little more time. Firms have a little bit more time. Their administrators and leaders have a little bit more time to carry through in that larger succession plan that we talked about, that is the replacement of my generation. Because if my generation is not replaced in its entirety, then revenue of firms is going to suffer. Now, something that's interesting to me that, hopefully I'll live long enough to see what happens about, is that there are fewer lawyers coming up through the ranks than there are in my generation of revenue generators. I was a big producer at my firm. There are lots of very, very capable younger lawyers coming up who, at my firm, who are every bit as good as me, are going to be every bit as successful as I was or more. So, but that's not the case at all firms. And the demographics rake against a trend that is helpful to law firms. There are only so many lawyers behind me in the next productive generation, and they are fewer in number than the baby boomers in my generation. So something's got to give. There are going to be firms that fall away as a result of that because there won't be enough lawyers to fully replace my generation.
Yeah. And now is the time to take advantage of the slow part of that retirement and start planning now.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks so much, David. I really appreciate your perspective on, a successful succession plan, and thanks for coming on and telling us all about it.
Well, I appreciate the time you put into thinking about this, Justin. Obviously, you pondered this topic. It's really important, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Of course. Thanks so much to our listeners and viewers and subscribers for tuning in. If you want to hear more legal management talk, you can be sure to find us on most every streaming platform, and please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you never miss an episode. And you can learn more about ALA at alanet.org. Until next time.